Well, hello. How are you guys today? Hopefully, fighting ferociously for the ways of truth. There is a great perpetual onslaught of deception just pummeling the very minds of people. It's outrageous. It really is. For those of you who don't know, I have a website called snatchedfromtheflames.com. I put up content there, you guys, that has been banned in different places because I'm really funneled through a system of filters when I just post here exclusively. So, some of the content that I've done, interviews that I've done with other incredible places, people that are really salty. You know what I'm saying? People that are not ashamed to tell the truth no matter the cost or the consequences, who have had to develop their own platforms in order to do that. I post that content on my website directly, along with like everything I've ever posted, including stuff that's been taken down and deleted over the years because there's just this pecking going on right now behind the scenes that you guys don't see. There's these little wars that happen for content creators that are just quietly chipping away at the pieces of truth. Like my wife was trying to look up a topic recently on YouTube and find a bunch of documentaries. She had put together this list of resources regarding health. And man, she had all of these documentaries that she had put together a couple years ago when one of her friends was asking her about it. She tried to go and search for those very ones, and she realized that all of them, except for one, had been scrubbed. Almost a dozen of them had just been completely scrubbed. Their pages taken down, their channels deleted, everything. And you realize the inability that many of us have in order to bring forth information in an unfiltered way, and how quick it is. I mean, in some ways, very slow, very sly it's been for them to just slowly muzzle the people. And it's really a difficult journey. You realize that it's because there's a great fear in the enemy's camp for the truth to go out there. I was reading in the book of John, spending a lot of time in the gospels, y'all. That's the good news. People just call it the gospel. It's like you hear the word law or the Torah. It doesn't really mean a whole lot to you unless you have like a depth of it, if you've read it like on the regular over and over and over again. Then it has all kinds of meaning to you when you hear the phrase like the law in the scriptures. You hear this Torah. It's what it means is the loving instructions of the Father. That's what the Torah means. That's what the law means to a Hebrew. When they would hear the phrase the law, that's what they would think of. They would not think of like what you and I think of growing up in Western society. When we hear the law, we think Greek and Roman. We think of punishment. We think of like all of the things that are just suck in the world, like the 40 million laws that are in the United States, just crazy stuff. Like the average American commits 3 felonies a day without realizing it, that kind of stuff. You're like, the burden of the law versus the law that gives freedom. Like the book of James even says, it's like the law of liberty. Let's go there for a second too. This is James chapter 1. And become doers. Oh, let's just back up. Come on. Every time I hear the word of truth, man, I get fired up. This is what it says all over the scriptures. It's called the word of truth. It's like the gospels, the word of truth, this good news that's delivered to the nations. It's all about the kingdom. Dr. Michael Lake, we've been talking about his book, The Sharith Imperative, Preparing the Way for, no, not, that's his first book. Sharith Imperative. It's like empowering the remnant armies. It's so good. Anyways, he has a series that's called Understanding the Kingdom. It was one of my absolute favorite series that he ever did over the years. It's like 43, maybe way more parts now, 46 parts, something like that. It's a long series because it's all about this kingdom. You got to understand kingdom theology, kingdom mindset.
And I will take him away. And Jesus said unto her, Mary. You want to know what's waking up the remnant right now? Jesus is calling the remnant by name. Their eyes are being opened. I don't know about you, but that excites me. That's telling me that the time is close. When I hear about people awakening to their Hebraic heritage, awakening to end-time events, they can be in the deepest, darkest jungle of Africa, and Almighty God will wake them up in the middle of the night and say, you better start studying the Old Testament. There is something. God is calling us by name. Oh, I love this.
Because it's not just about like bad versus good or good versus bad. It's more like in the world that they're presenting us out there, it's like bad versus evil. That's kind of like the choices that they give us when it comes to worldly opportunities for like what you can have when it comes to the people that, are your leaders, your rulers. It sucks. They basically give us the lesser end of two evil sticks. And they're like, you can pick whichever one is less bad. That's your options today. And you're like, dang it. It's like the world society that so many of us are pressed into this time. Like I'm trying to raise up my children with an understanding to be able to clearly identify the fruits of people's lives very quickly, to be able to ascertain whether or not this person has evil intent inside their heart or whether they are authentically righteous or not. And it's the way we do that is through the inspection of the fruit. But being able to understand what the scriptures really means, like why it's called the word of truth, why it's like for our good to follow the commands of Yahweh, why it's life for us when we do these things. It literally says, having purposed it, he brought us forth by the word of truth for us to be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. So then, my beloved brothers, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man does not work the righteousness of Elohim. Therefore, put away all filthiness and overflow of evil, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your lives. And become doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. Because if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man who looks at his natural face in the mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and immediately forgets what he was like. But he that looked into the perfect Torah, that of freedom, and continues in it, not becoming a hearer that forgets, but a doer of this work, this one shall be blessed in his doing of the Torah. If any among you thinks he's religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this one's religion is worthless. Clean and undefiled religion before the Elohim and Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. This is the core tenet of what it is that we are supposed to diligently guard ourselves from, is this these staining mechanisms of the world. This world system is truly set up as this Babylonian Egyptian hierarchy where they have this dragon courts that by which the ruling elite govern society, these ones who have set themselves up after this, the image of those from the days of Babylon and Nimrod. They're reigning in a tyrannical system, and yet there's territories where they give people the illusion of a form of freedom, but it's so far divorced from that which our true origins were, and people that the actual experiences of what somebody who grew up in the colonies of the Americas early on or just after the early American Revolution. There was this experiential time here for 100, almost 150 years, where there was more of self sovereignty, where people were able to govern themselves and be able to raise their families up in autonomy. And it was such a unique experience for people to be able to have without the rulership, the tyrannical oversight of the lords, of the kings, of the magistrates. And it gave a very different cultural perspective. It gave people an opportunity to study and know the word and to bloom in their ability to cultivate life in this country. And so there's still this longing for people that are in America now. There's this grieving that's taking place. There's this groaning, this anger that's building towards a great anger right now, because we're watching that system, that the experience of what many people had, still pieces of it a few generations ago. We've watched that get degraded down until we're just eking out an existence, desperately trying to hold on to those values, to those small areas of freedom that we can cling to before the last bits of sovereignty from these monsters, these tyrants come and peel those back from us. Like even in our country right now, there's like laws going into effect where they're going to regulate whether a boat is allowed under 35 feet is allowed to go more than 10 knots in the water for up to 100 miles off the shorelines. Just crazy types of things in order to save, under the illusion, the auspice of protecting right whales from being struck by boats. A total ridiculous sidestep of what the real issue is. It's these levels of control. Like in 2026, they want to have kill switches put into all the new cars being manufactured so they can turn them off whenever they want to. Like it's this type of stuff that just is coming in, and it's encroaching upon our ability to just live a life of autonomy. And it's deepening, if anything, on one side, it's deepening the chasm between us and them, if that makes sense. It's causing that rift to grow deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's creating this constant low level aggravations, constant low level aggression between this polarity of people that's being diametrically shoved into different corners, and then they're being made to look at each other. The people are being made to look at each other people, as the problems, not recognizing it's these benefactors behind the scenes. It's this, on one side, yes, a financial, but really a religious order, truly this great universal pressing from the whore of Babylon, this great Knights of Columbus and Jesuits, the great Pope. I mean, there is this black nobility of rulers, dynastic rulers, especially in the Western Empire from Italy, that has encroached upon people through this ideological pursuit of Babylonian and Roman mysticism that's been pushed on people. It's Machiavellian. It's just this constant way of problem, reaction, solution, this way of grinding away at people to get them to accept total domination. And you sit there going through this stuff, and it's infuriating. And people are sitting there right now with this restlessness, this angst, this anger, and they're looking for places to direct it. And this is what we're encroaching upon this time right now, where this season they're trying to build that and foment that to such an expression, and they want to channel it towards things like World War III and going back and volunteering our children to die in wars. However, the greatest war that we really are still always faced with and pressed with is the person in the mirror. We have to first, above all else, address these strongholds that are within us that allow grounds for the enemy seed, the seeds of the world, to sow into us and germinate and prosper and become fertile, to become fruitful. We have to be on guard against all of those schemes of the enemy, because as much as they're trying to drive that bits of rage and anger and disillusionment, we must understand that there is a fortification that happens when we wash ourselves in the water of the word, when we seek our Father's kingdom first, when we seek his kingdom and his righteousness first. All these other things get added to us. Like, I was reading in the Psalms, and he talks about he chooses our inheritances for us. Like, that's one of those things that should give us a great peace of mind, because yes, this world is trying to strip away so many of our inheritances. Like, here in the Americas, there's this death tax, like an inheritance tax, where they literally steal away the inheritances of your father. So your father left you an inheritance or an estate of some kind, whatever level of it he may have. The government comes in and steals that. They get that literally from the Egyptians. This was one of the first ways that the Egyptian society got turned into the reigns of pharaohs, right? They literally, a man who was not related to the kingship line, was not one of the chosen bloodlines. He came in with guile and cunning, and he decided, I wanted to make myself. He wanted to make himself great. He's like, I want to be great before the king, and I want to meet with the king. Well, he couldn't, and so he's like, I need a way of taking captivity the ways of the people. I need money. I need power. And so he hired a bunch of rabble, right? A bunch of like hooligans, bodyguards, buff dudes, to force people to extort people. This is like a mafia. This is like the origin stories of a lot of the mafias, right? You know what I'm saying? He ran an extortion campaign. And what he did is he went to the tombs, and he literally went there with all his buff bodyguards. And he's all like, listen, if you guys want to bury the dead, you're going to pay me 200 pieces of silver. You're not allowed to bury the dead. And this is because the king says so. And they're all like, well, we can't go ask the king because he only comes out once a year. And we're like, dang it. This is from the book of Jasher. If you guys have never read it, fantastic book. I highly recommend it. Anyways, they're like, what are we going to do? We can't ask the king if he actually gave this order. This sucks. We got to pay up. We got to pay up. You know what I mean? And the people became heavily burdened by this for an entire year. And over that time, man, the guy got rich, super rich, crazy wealthy. And then when the day came that the king came out to talk to the people, they're all like, hey, this guy came out here and he's telling all of us we got to pay 200 pieces of silver before we can bury our dead. What place in the world, all the world, extorts a tax from the dead? He's like, I never said that. And they're all like, so what? So then he calls him forward and he's like, tell me what you've done. And he comes with all this wealth and all of these bribes. And the king's like, dang, you got that much money from the people? You smart. I like your style. So they call him Pharaoh, and he makes him like second in command of all the kingdom, until that guy usurps him. Pharaoh usurps the actual king and overthrows him and then takes rule of the people. That's literally like the dynasty of Pharaoh. That's like where it comes from. This is where our government got the ideological pursuits from that kingdom. This is why, like, we're under the influence of Egypt here. This is the land of Egypt more than you can even possibly begin to start to understand. And we know that because of the fruits that we find here, the ways that they extort from us, and literally, like, they make us work so hard that we can't even raise our families. That was the tactic that the Egyptians used to try to keep the Israelites from procreating. They're like, we're going to work their men so hard that they're too tired to even come home and be with their wives, that it's too much of a burden for them to reproduce. That was literally their tactic. And I sit here and I'm watching this. I'm like, this is the world that I'm living in right now. This is exactly the system that they've designed for us. And it's just a perpetual onslaught that you're having a battle against and wage a war against. And it's making people need tactics for overcoming it. And truly, what we need is a deliverer. We need deliverers. We need judges to rise up, righteous men and women who are filled with the set apart spirit, who are able to know the word of Elohim and do mighty deeds, actually go out and work wonders. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what's promised to us as the days of evil increase. He pours out his spirit like in greater measure to counterforce it. It says when the enemy comes in like a flood, Yahweh raises up a standard, like a resistance force against it. There's floods coming. Any of you ever seen people trying to stop a flood? One of the main uses is they fill up bags with sand, right? And they stack them and stack them and stack them and stack them to try to build up this means with which to resist that onslaught of water. The enemy is coming in like a flood, the unleashing of the hordes of hell, these portals that are being opened up, this like constant overreach from the enemy that's coming in at every angle, in every direction. What that does, it's increasing the pressure on the righteous people. And you know what that should do is drive us to deepen our foundations in the word, because our Messiah has the cure for these things. As we wash ourselves in the water of the word, he will pour out wisdom upon us. Like we talked about earlier with Esther, and how he gave her wisdom and insight on how to literally overthrow the great conspiracy to murder all of her people. He gave her wisdom when she fasted, and all of the people of the nation fasted collectively in a unified attempt to pray and intercede for deliverance. And Yahweh answered it and gave her favor, right? Grace. He gave her grace to overcome the wiles of the enemy. When we seek his face, when we fall on our knees and cry out to him and we petition him to deliver us from the epigenetic onslaught of the augmentation campaigns, like the adversary is working day and night to steal, kill, and destroy. That's what his main agenda has been from the beginning, right? Come on, never forget this, right? Let's go back to John 8. Okay. This is so good. Here it is. This is John 8. And this is verse 30. And as he was speaking these words, many believed in him. So Yeshua said to those Yahudim who believed him, if you stay in my word, you are truly my taught ones, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This is that phrase that people like to quote. They like to misquote this verse. It's like called snippet theology, where people are like, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free or make you free. But that's not the verse. That's like a snippet out of it, right? And that's given out of context constantly so that people think if you can know the truth, then you're set free. That's not what he said. He said, if you abide, if you stay in my word, then you shall know the truth. Then the truth shall set you free. So this is a recipe with which we can have freedom. So we're sitting here experiencing tyrannical overreach on an ongoing, perpetual, continual basis, and it's driving us nuts. It's driving us beyond frustrated, and it's teaching us learned helplessness. That's the goal, that will respond with animalistic instincts, right? That will respond out of fear, okay? Out of fear and out of rage and out of anger and these things that cause these emotions to respond in us. But he's sitting here and he's telling us, listen, if we instead root ourselves, be staying rooted and grounded in love. So we stay rooted in his word. When we stay in his word, we abide in his word. When we diligently seek him through his word, what it does is it gives us the foundational grasp to be able to pull nutrients from the right source. It's like Psalm 1. Okay. If you guys don't walk outside and look at trees enough, go check out trees that are next to water. It's the best. Oh, if you live in the deserts, I pray for you. Yah opens up springs of water near you so you can see the goodness of this. I grew up so much of my life in the desert. Oh, so sad. It's so hard. It's really hard being in the desert all the time. Like, it really is. It wears on you in ways you just don't even know or realize. One of the benefits in the deserts, I grew up in the mountainous deserts, right? So the mountains and the deserts have a very unique feature to them in that they get snow in the winter, and then that slowly melts off during the course of the summer. So it allows there to be greater fertility. It's like a trickle down system of water in places where there is none. So there's more life, right? Ponderosa pine forest is what I grow up in all the time. But there's nothing on the ground really. Like it's pine needles and rocks predominantly. You can walk through the forest unhindered completely everywhere you go. It's just like an open forest. And so it's a very different experience versus when you go out east, right? You start heading east and you get these thick forests, very dense overgrowth, briars and thistles and things that are just going to grab and tear you up. You can't really walk through them easily, except in the winter. Then you have this like season where you can go out exploring it a totally different way and just bushwhack more directly through the forest. And it's a totally different experience. But just being able to see trees that get to grow near the water and you get to look at the difference, the contrast. Like if you watch that Dangerous Dips episode, there is a massive there's hemlock and then there's these eastern white pines that are growing right by this waterfall and you just see the massive size of these trees, and that's because they're planted by the source of life. They are the exception where all these other trees died off in the course of, like, especially for the eastern hemlock, a lot of them died off and these horrific little bugs come in and just decimate their entire population down to a few. But the ones that were planted by this water survived, and they're these like older growth trees, and it's beautiful to get to see. But this is what it says, where that comes from for us. Blessed is the man who shall not walk in the counsel of the wrong, and shall not stand in the path of sinners, and shall not sit in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the Torah of Yahuwah, and he meditates in his Torah day and night. For he shall be as a tree planted by the rivers of water, that yields its fruit in its season, and whose leaf does not wither. And whatever he does, he prospers. The wrong are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind blows away. Therefore the wrong shall not rise in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For Yahuwah knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wrong comes to naught. They're guaranteed endings to these stories. There's a guaranteed outcome that's inevitable that people are going to experience. Those that walk in the path of the wicked, they will inevitably experience falling into the pit that they have dug, the snare that they have dug. Like, this is how Yeshua is confronting these people that are resisting him, right? The Pharisees. There was this hierarchical ruling religious order. That's who he's contending with. There's a serpent cult. Predominant people that Yeshua, like, understand, he made his war with serpent cults from the beginning because there's these children of the serpent, okay? Not necessarily just by bloodline, like a lot of them starting from Cain, they believe, okay? It's a whole other long topic. That there is like a generational line that gives them kingship, gives them the right to rule, where they're like more of a Gnostic doctrine that people believe in, have transposed upon the scriptures. That Cain is of a different line and Abel was a different line. Man meant to toil in the earth, while the king, Cain, was meant to rule and govern over cities, right? This is this kind of elitism, goes all the way back to this place. This religious order, okay, the mystery religions have been practicing in these cults in so many different forms. And that doesn't mean they're always going to look like one religion, okay? They practice within religious sects. They practice within religious orders all over the world, transculturally, across all the different cultures of the world. This serpent cults have infested themselves because that's their ideological pursuit, is to go inside and infect things with doctrines of demons and lead those people back towards ultimately the authority of the dragon, to put themselves under the subjection to the great dragon. That's all this hierarchy is pointed towards. And here is Yeshua confronting those who are resisting him and resisting the truth, right? And here it goes on from that place where he's saying the truth shall make you free. They answered him and said, we are the seed of Abraham and have been servants to no one at any time. How do you say you shall become free? Yeshua answered them, saying, truly I say to you, everyone doing sin is a servant of sin. And the servant does not stay in the house forever. A son stays forever. If then the Son makes you free, you shall be free indeed. I know that you are the seed of Abraham, but you seek to kill me because my word has no place in you. See, their souls, the fertility of their hearts, the soil of their heart had no room in it for what his word was. They could not receive with meekness the engrafted word. They could not, because they had already been filled with the tares of the devil. Like the devil had already sown in so much false doctrine, so much doctrines of demons into their hearts that they were consumed with pride, and there was no room for them to entertain any of the idolatry, any of the words and the information that Yeshua was trying to impart upon them. They could not receive any of it. And this is what so many of you are going to bump into when you're trying to bring somebody to an understanding of the scriptures and it's the beauty of it, the wonder of it. Like it says later on in the scriptures, like to the world, it's foolishness. Like to the world, it's foolishness when we preach to people and share with them about the Messiah. And to the Jews, they hate it, right? They hate it. But to the Greeks, they think it's foolishness. They're like, this is idiocracy, a bunch of stupid people, right? This has been going on from the very beginning, okay? None of it has changed, the fruit of it, because the hearts of men have still been taken captive by the devil to do his desire with the very same lies that he spoke from the very beginning. They've been very effective, so he doesn't have to change his tactics. The enemy doesn't change an effective weapon system. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, for instance, we have had the B-29, the United States military. I'm just going to go there because I'm like classically trained in the United States military in a sense. You know what I'm saying? Especially with aircraft. The B-29 Super Fortress, right? This gigantic bomber, basically developed in the 1940s for the United States to develop a long-range bomber that was capable of carrying a tremendous amount of bombs, propeller-driven, okay, not jet aircraft originally in that sense. Later on, jet aircraft. Like these things are massive. Let me just show you a picture of these things because it would help so much. B-29 is kind of the origin story of our really heavy aircraft bombers. Let me show you this. And I'll show you what it developed into and where the world went after this. Okay. I'll show you the B-29. It'll help to have a little scale of reference to the size of these things next to tiny little people. This makes a difference here. Watch this. I'm going to show you two here because there's a couple different aircraft of this size. The B-52. This is where it comes from. So like in the United States is developing the strategic bombing air force, right? You know what I'm saying? It was like the Army Air Force, Army Air Corps at the time. The United States, when we were in World War II, we didn't have an Air Force. We had the Army Air Corps. Later on, the Air Force got developed. So let me show you this here. Check this out. Let me show you guys this. This is the B-29. You see the size of this thing? Absolutely massive, right? This is next to little people. This is like one of our first ones, things that we're talking about when we're firebombing Japan and just trying to melt them into pieces. This is the aircraft that we were like, had really developed and honed to be able to do that. Okay. Later on, this project got developed into the B-52 Stratoforce. Okay. This thing has been around since, like I said, this is the 40s. Unbelievably massive. This is it. Okay. First flight, April 15th, 1952, 71 years ago. You see this? This aircraft has been in service in the United States military since the 1950s. Now, there's been some moderate iterations to it over the years, okay? Let me just show you it. Let's see if I can get you one in scale of another person. These are other bombers that they're showing it with. There you go. That's a good one. So you guys get to see it. B-17, this is one that was used predominantly in Europe, the B-17 Flying Fortress, when you're thinking about all the air raids over Germany and over France and all these places where you're bombing the just snot out of. Horrible, crazy times. This is B-17. They built these like crazy. This is the B-29. Okay. Then the modern B-52. This is the one that we have adopted and been utilizing ever since. Okay. When you have a weapon system that is highly effective, they don't stop using it. Okay. Why change it if it works so well? That's basically been the ideological pursuit when you make war about it. The enemy has had very effective strategies that don't need any changes done to them since the beginning. He's had thousands of years. You must understand, you're fighting against immortals. It's the better translation of angels in the scripture should be immortals. It would help you instantly have a different picture because you've been brainwashed by Catholic doctrine of flying naked babies. That's who you're fighting. You're like, the angels, those little puffy baby fart fairy things. No, immortals. Brilliant, smarter than any of you, all of you. Seriously, smarter than all of us combined. Not a joke. You guys are people are like fearful of AI. You guys understand something. The smartest AI is never going to outcompete the immortals. Do you get what I'm saying here? They might embody it. They might try to put the spirit of the immortals into the AI so that they have bodies of technology with which to interface with. That's maybe a different that's a totally different topic. We can get there someday. But the immortals have been around from the beginning. Okay, so understand they were created. They're not without a beginning, but they are without an end. They don't die. That's why they didn't need to procreate. And so the ones that rebelled and did procreate, that's why it was a huge deal because they never needed to have children, right? When Yahweh created them, He created them with brilliance in totally different ways. But then when they rebelled, they took that brilliance, right? And they weaponized it as a form of like psychology. They weaponized the minds, understanding their targets. They evaluated why people are the way they are and what motivates them to do their bidding. Okay. And how do we take them captive? That's the whole sole desire of it. And so when you're dealing with serpent cults and you're dealing with people that are insidious infiltrators, wolves, coming in and trying to sow discord among the brethren, trying to steal and kill and devour. These people have an origin story that comes from the minds of these immortals. They've been trained by them. They have drank from the cups of demons. Literally, like people literally sit down, you guys, and drink from skulls, and they consume these the ideological like concepts of these beings, of these immortals. They consume their doctrine, their words, and then they consume the blood, the life of them. You must understand that's why it procreates. That's how they carry on these secret teachings generationally. This is why the forms of Malthusian eugenics, right? Why people are like, oh, the people are going to keep breeding indefinitely, and there's only limited resources on this planet Earth. And so we got to find ways to systemically kill off the population so that there's nowhere near as many people, right? That ideological endeavor came from the minds of the immortals. The watchers sowed that doctrine into the cup, they poured that doctrine into the cup of the skull, and they gave that to their partitioners. And that's what they've been drinking from that cup of eugenics. That's why we see now here we are 180 years out from that, and we're seeing the fruit of that being born forth across the world stage, where people are literally getting up there and saying it's better that people die than they cause harm to the planet, right? Total misconstruction of understanding. Stewardship, like we were called to be stewards of this earth. We are not called to be tyrants over the earth. But unfortunately, we have people that make foolish decisions and govern things out in horrific ways. This cup of sickness that the people have drunk from has made them blinded their minds. They're literally drunk on it. They're drunk on it and they can't stop it. Okay. And the world system of these immortals, what they've been able to do is they've been able to create a society. They've been able to create a society that rewards that type of behavior. That if you go down this psychopathic road, if you go down this searing of your conscience and you're willing to play along with them and their ways of destroying morality, destroying family, destroying righteousness, finding ways to eradicate self sovereignty and to create instead global governance. If you're willing to go along with them in that agenda, they'll reward you for that. And that's why some of you guys need to seriously pray and consider whether or not the devil is the one blessing you. Some of you guys have been blessed and prospered in a sense throughout most of your life because you were never an effective enemy against the kingdom of darkness. In fact, you were actually a collaborator with him in building up his kingdom of darkness. And some of you need to seriously wrestle with whether or not you have actually put yourself in a position throughout your life that the reason you're being blessed may not be from your creator, may not be from Yahweh, the Most High. It may truly be the devil that's blessing you and keeping you from experiencing opposition and difficulties and persecution because you're not actually in the war against him. You're actually contributing to his kingdom's goals. Like you're somebody who's building the engines for the B-52 Stratoforce to go ahead and bomb the remnant, right? Some of you guys are a part of that system. Now, if you're there as a double agent and you're on assignment and the Father's given you directive to go into a place, man, go for it all you can. Some of you guys need to stay exactly implanted inside those organizations and inside those places and do your deeds from within to be able to cause the seeds of righteousness to get sown everywhere, because we're supposed to bring the gospel of this kingdom to every creature. And for some of you, the Yah's literally opened doors for you to be able to get into places where nobody else can. And I pray that Yah blesses you with the wisdom and understanding, like Esther was, supplanted way behind enemy lines. You know what I'm saying? Like some of you guys are way down deep inside the belly of the beast, and that's where you're supposed to be on assignment. If you're supposed to be there, I applaud you. But for those of you that have just been lukewarm in the system for a long time, understand there's this great war that you can be a part of every single day for the souls of mankind. And that's where we're supposed to put our labors. If we put our minds towards that, like our talents, our gifts, like the things that the Father's entrusted to us to do, put ourselves in that pursuit. He will bless us and empower us to do mighty deeds, right? This is what happens to the showdown here. Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone doing sin is a servant of sin. And the servant does not stay in the house forever. A son stays forever. If then the son makes you free, you shall be free indeed. I know that you are the seed of Abraham, but you seek to kill me because my word has no place in you. I speak what I have seen with my father, and you do what you have heard from your father. They answered and said to him, Abraham is our father. Yeshua said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has spoken to you the truth which I heard from Elohim. Abraham did not do this. You do the works of your father. Then they said to him, We are not born of whoring. We have one father, Elohim. Yeshua said to them, If Elohim were your father, you would love me. For I came forth from Elohim and am here. For I have not come of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not know what I say? Because you are unable to hear my word. You are of your father, the devil, the dragon, and the desires of your father you wish to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and has not stood in the truth because there's no truth in him. When he speaks the lie, he speaks of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. And because I speak the truth, you do not believe me. Who of you proves me wrong concerning sin? And if I speak the truth, why do you not believe me? He who is of Elohim hears the word of Elohim. Therefore, you do not hear because you are not of Elohim. See, the devil, you must understand something, has placed in the hearts of men his desires. When we hear the words of the world, when we hear and listen to it, and we give grounds to it, and we repeat it, when we gestate on it, when we chew on it, when we think about it, when we ruminate on it, when we take in those influences, understand we are going to do the desires of that word. Okay. That word, the word of truth, the word of the gospel, the word of the kingdom of righteousness, when we listen to that, when we take that in, like that is why, you guys, I did the audio recording of the scriptures, was to try to literally wash my home in it, like trying to sit there. It started with me sitting down and reading the scriptures to my children at night. That's where it started, man. Over 2.5 years ago, 2.5 years ago. I sat down every night and tried to read the scriptures to my children because I understood the value of the last thing on their mind would be hearing their father's voice, reading the word over them. That was where it started for me. But then I found an even greater benefit to it, that if I could have that just saturating my family, that would be the goal, that they would hear this truth. Like my children have heard that word being spoken over them. And so that's why a year ago, I did the audio Bible project. I spent months working on that before the twins were born. I wanted to have a legacy. Because full disclosure, you guys, I live like I'm dying all the time. I do. It's hard for me to picture a long life. Does that make sense? It always has been. I've struggled with a time perception problem. I have good vision. I have excellent vision, but I lack an accurate presentation, an accurate perception of time. And that's because when it was so early on in my life, time was so short lived for so many people around me. I saw death so readily, so often, that it skewed my perception of long life. To me, life was something that was very short and very cheaply valued. And so it has taken me years and years of deliberately trying and seeking to restore an accurate understanding of longevity for my life, because I could not imagine living to be a teenager. I, I, I could not fathom the idea of living to graduate high school. Like I genuinely could not perceive myself surviving that long. I couldn't imagine it. I couldn't imagine that I would make it out. I really couldn't. I was so systemically convinced that death was next for me, was immediately around the corner. And so even going into the military, like I was seeking death. I wanted the relief that death promised me. Does that make sense? Because I listened to the words of the dragon in my life early on, that death was the only escape for me, that the only way I would get out of that cult, the only way I would ever get out of the inescapable mind control was through death. That was it. Like you die to come in, you're born again to that kingdom of the coven of this horrible world, and death is the only way you're out. And so I was convinced of it. And even to when like getting to know Chelsea and starting to imagine maybe maybe I can have a life that involves a wife, you know? Maybe that could be for me. maybe I could know that as my own. Maybe that could be something that's mine. Maybe I'll get to experience that. And then it came to pass, and I was able to be married to her and be able to experience having a wife in my life. And then for 5 years, there was no way we couldn't conceive children. And then the father opened her womb and it was like, man, I need to be a father. That was where the permanency kind of mindset shifted, because even up until that point, Chelsea and I really were really heavy into the prepping side of life. That was like really where we devoted a lot of our time and our energy, especially for, oh man, from like 2012 till 2017, we really did 2016. We devoted a lot of our time and our energy and our resources towards preparing for the inevitable struggle, right? The end of the world as we knew it, right? A societal collapse, the inevitable destruction of our economic system, the financial collapse that was coming, right? The banking collapse, well, all the different scenarios that were playing themselves out at the time and still continue to play themselves out in different iterations. I'm not trying to condemn people that are trying to do their utmost to prepare their families in reasonable ways for that. Just understand that my life took such a different trajectory because I decided to I took on a different battlefield. Instead of self-preservation being kind of one of my predominant focuses in my preparation, I turned towards arming up spiritually with doctrine and with discipline, if that makes sense. I changed my pursuits. I began to try to really focus my efforts on understanding him, his character, his ways, and beginning to align my family to understand it. Because I started doing a lot of actual like bugging out drills. We started like actually loading our preps into our vehicle and bugging out to the mountains, to the places that we had like our supplies and stuff cached and all that stuff. We started like testing ourselves, going out with our backpack in the mountains, hiking into the mountains and experiencing, okay, what would it actually be like for us to try to survive in this manner? Like, what are the hardships? What are the challenges? How are the tools, the resources, like our approach in a lot of ways for like picking out our bug out kit and all the rest of it was the best potential quality of items rather than quantity. We went with like a few very select, very excellent items. Like the backpacking tent that I got was a single walled tent. Most people go to the store and buy a tent. You can't buy a single walled tent at almost any store. This is what they use for things like expeditions, right? When people are going to go hike up K2 or Everest, they have single walled tents instead of, a 3-season tent with a fly, which is the vast majority of all the tents that are sold out there. We got one that was engineered so that you could bury it in the snow and it would still be self-supporting, because we would get 80-mile-an-hour winds in the mountains. And those would collapse most people's tents, right? Serious thunderstorms and rainstorms. You watch people, especially Sukkot. Sukkot's a hilarious, awesome. If you guys haven't done Sukkot, it's like bugging out practice every year. You get like 10 days out into the wilderness and they're like, you go for it, bro. Go live in temporary dwellings. Then you get to see how much they suck or if they're awesome. True story. Sukkot's fantastic. That's the Feast of Tabernacles. It's an incredible, like, mandatory mission to go bug out for a couple weeks every year. It's a great opportunity to test this, you guys. And I think the fundamental heart of it is that you would not become too comfortable in your worldly blessings. Like the Israelites when they left Egypt, they had the best houses, they had the best land. Understand this. They left comfort to go dwell in miserably difficult situations and experiences. That's why we're told to do Sukkot. It's like, listen, understand that your forefathers left good stuff behind in Egypt. There was a lot of slavery stuff, but understand they had suburbia. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of them, they had the comforts of the best that Egypt had to offer. Joseph got his family the best land in all of Mitzrayim. Like the sweetest choices pieces of land became theirs when they were first coming in. They had all the favor of Pharaoh, right? They had the best stuff. All of the plagues that happened, all when Yahweh judged the immortals, understand, like it says in the book of Exodus, it wasn't just like these plagues and these signs and wonders that Yahweh performed. They weren't just like, oh, he turned the river to blood, like, oh, wow, he sent all the locusts to devour everything. Oh my gosh, see, the river is totally filled with frogs. All of these things, he says, I judged the immortals of Egypt. I judged the Elohim of Egypt. He judged their gods. That's who he dealt with, you guys. That was because the people were crying out the blood of the innocents that were being sacrificed into the walls of their buildings. The people were being forced to practice inurement, shoving their babies and sacrificing them into the walls, throwing them into the rivers. Like, this is where Moses came from. Okay. They were being forced into this horrific political pressure system, this military control state that had taken over their freedoms, taken over their life to such a horrific extent that these people were being forced to put their children through death. It's a horrible time to be alive, brutal time to be alive. But as they were crying out, their cries came up to heaven, and Yahuwah answered them and sent a deliverer, right? But then he did the things that he had to do behind the scenes. There is entities that we are wrestling with right now behind those tyrannical people, the figureheads on this earth. I always call them the agents of evil. There are spiritual mighty ones, immortals, who sit right behind them, who empower them, who literally give them the resources they need to be effective in the war that they are fighting on the front that immortal is tasked with. Okay. These princes of darkness, they have marching orders. They have an AEO, like an area of operations. Okay. They have ROE, sorry, rules of engagement with which they are governed on how they're allowed to attack, destroy, manipulate, coerce, how they're tasked with accomplishing their goals. Okay. This is why it's beneficial to study military doctrine, because it'll give you a lens with which how to see the adversary's tactics against us, because this is how the dragon sets up his kingdom. He is the predominant ruler of this age. And then he has a hierarchy of generals. Okay. Like in the United States military, we have the commander of the army. Okay. There's a commander of the Air Force. There's a commander of the Navy. There's a commander of the Marines. There's a commander of the Coast Guard. There's the main commander of each of those. Okay. Then there's a secretary of defense. Then there's the president, the United States president. Really, it's called the commander in chief in that or chain of command. That chain of command operates similar. It's always a similitude to the kingdom of darkness hierarchy, which built their structure off of the similitude of the Most High, Yahuwah Elohim. He has a divine council of immortals that he delegates out responsibilities to, and they have other immortals that they delegate out those tasks to. This is why we have messenger angels who are sent out like little ambassadors to do their will. Well, the kingdom of darkness has similar ones who go out and enact his will on this earth. So when we are dealing with problems physically in our physical world, understand all of what we're seeing manifest in this physical world first had in its origins a spiritual starting point. There was a catalyst that started in the spiritual realm that began that process, that started off the spark that ignited the fuse to that going off in our lives. This is reality of what we experience. And that's why I try to, in every way that I can, you guys, point people back towards a spiritual understanding of the war that we're wrestling in. It's not to say that we don't take physical actions as preventative measures to try to protect ourselves from some and prepare ourselves from some of those things taking place. Like my family, we had to leave the preparations that we had in Colorado. We had to leave the friends group, the resources. Like we had doctors, we had surgeons, we had people that had all kinds of talents and skills, mechanics, extra parts, training, weapons specialists, all kinds of other guys who knew undercover work, tradecraft, right? We had a total different network of people and resources back in Colorado. But when I chose to pursue fighting for my family's freedom, choosing to embrace fatherhood, choosing to look towards the future beyond the immediate survival of my family during a cataclysm, during the inevitable breakdown of society that was coming, because we were watching it and we were experiencing the pressures of it out in Colorado, in Denver, and in Westminster and Boulder. We were experiencing the transition so rapidly towards a tyrannical control state so quickly out there that we knew this is the epicenter of where it's going to build from. Like National Institute of Science and Technologies there in Boulder. It's like the nest of the dragon. It's the timekeeper of the world. It's where like he has a nest for the dragon. And it's like the seat of power is right there for the kingdom of darkness. And so you feel that pressure. There's an incredible oppressive force there. There's other oppressive dynastic places where you can tell a seriously powerful throne or principality governs from that literal place. You may not see it with your physical eyes, but you can experience the fruit of it. You can experience it. You feel sick in your stomach. It's a horribly oppressive environment. That's often because you're literally coming into the territory. This guy, Frank Peretti, I don't know if any of you guys have ever read his books. He has a book called Piercing the Darkness. These are awesome books, Piercing the Darkness and This Present Darkness. He has another one that's even better, which is called The Oath, which deals with Freemasons controlling a dragon that they use to just, and through the doors, the legal grounds of sin to devour people. It's fantastic. the guy's telling true stories, but he fictionalizes them in its own way so that people will be able to digest it, because most people, especially back in the 80s, and the audience that he was writing to, were just incapable of truly comprehending the level of depravity and darkness that was taking place out there. But he would write a story of how in the physical realm people were getting taken over, and then in the spiritual realm what it looked like behind the scenes. And literally, those are some of the best stories that I think, in a sense, fictionalize the way of how that actually operates. But there are literally these territories as you go into them where you experience that pressure to such an overwhelming extent, and so much of what it caused, whether it's brain fog, headache, like literally where you feel sick and uncomfortable, like you want to get out of there, like you just want to get away from there. That's because you're literally entering like an enemy stronghold. And the atmosphere, when they set up their territories, when these principalities set up, and these thrones set up their territories, their places where they run the show from, like their actual headquarters, okay? There's a change in the physical atmosphere and in the spiritual atmosphere in that region, to where it becomes oxygen deprived. It becomes to where it's like it's not a climate that is conducive for the health and the well-being of people that are walking in the kingdom of righteousness. It's adversarial towards the creatures of light. And instead, you will literally watch the types of beings that can tolerate it and are drawn to it are dark entities, are people that are possessed by the darkness, that are wholly addicted to drugs, that are conditioned to embrace insanity, rebellion, lawlessness, immorality, people that embrace it, Sin City. Does that make sense? I think so many of you guys have experienced this. It's becoming very common now, but that's how you know you're literally entering into the territories of these gods, of these immortals, because you're going to start to experience those feelings of oppression. Now, many need to learn in so many ways the power of prayer walking, where you go out and you learn how to walk an area and pray and ask the Father to bring revelation, insight, supernatural discernment of spirits of what's going on in that territory behind the scenes. That does not mean you're supposed to go into every area and just start praying against the principalities and the powers and the rulers and the thrones and trying to cast these things down and remove them from power. Listen, there is a rules of engagement on our side too, that if we supersede and we start mocking the devil, start mocking these entities, bringing railing accusations, like Jude is a book that gives you warning on some of those ROEs, the rules of engagement. Okay. Like before you go into a combat zone, before you go into a mission, your commander, it's an officer who's giving you like these are the rules of what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And these have been passed down the chain of command so that you know what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. They're critical for you to be able to continue to have the authority of your chain of command. So they'll have your back. So if you get into a really crappy day and everything goes to heck, like just blows up in your face, right? That it's not you who caused it. And so they got your back, right? Then you can call in air support still, and they're not going to be like, you're on your own because you screwed around. Like maybe the rules of engagement are you're not allowed to engage an enemy unless first fired upon, right? That's a very common rule of engagement. Okay, you must first be fired upon before they can shoot at you, right? Which sucks because a lot of times then you're literally watching the enemy build up an armament, build up and fortify their positions to prepare to attack you, and you're not allowed to do anything about it until that time. But Jude gives us warnings about the rules of engagement. Check this out. We'll also go to Revelation 12 because that's another one. There's a book for you guys to memorize. You can memorize a book of the Bible immediately. This is like a great sword for you to have. You can like receive so much of the engrafted word, the book of Jude. And in doing so, you're going to memorize a chunk of the book of First Enoch. Highly recommended. Way great recommendation. There's more prophecies about the Messiah in the book of First Enoch than almost any other scriptures combined. I'm not kidding. It's an incredible book. You'll hear more about the son of Adam and the son of righteousness. It's tremendous about the prophecies that are put in the book of First Enoch. Okay, I'm talking about Enoch the righteous. Second and third Enoch are different books written by totally different, the mystery religions, the sons of Cain, like the priests of wickedness. Enoch the evil. Okay, understand that. Anyways, for I intend to remind you, though you once knew this, that Yahuwah, having saved a people out of the land of Mitzrayim, afterward destroyed those who did not believe, and the messengers, immortals, who did not keep their own principality, but left their own dwelling, he has kept in everlasting shackles under darkness for the judgment of the great day. even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them, in a similar way to these, having given themselves over to whoring and gone after strange flesh, going after the flesh of the immortals. Remember, they were trying to mingle their seed with the seed of the immortals because they figured out maybe a way around it was to go down a form of, well, if the immortals don't engage in the sexual act, but other people force it upon them, they're like, well, maybe then Yahweh won't judge us like he did the previous immortals, and we'll get around it. But either way, genetic alteration experimentation campaigns took place in cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and Zeboim and the cities of the plain. That's why their judgment is similar to the watchers from before the flood, are set forth as an example, undergoing judicial punishment of everlasting fire. In the same way, indeed, these dreamers defile the flesh and reject authority and speak evil of esteemed ones. Okay. Why we are not to go around mocking the enemy. Does that make sense? Yeshua can go in and make a mockery of the enemy as he did when he went down into the earth and triumphed over them in victory, made a show of them, a spectacle of them. He is the chief shepherd, okay? He's totally entitled to do that, 100%. He's the victor. Now, he's given us victory by his works and by the Father's establishment of him as the authority in order to do that stuff. That does not mean then we go and act a fool, okay? Because you're dealing with those who have been around for a long time. Okay, we don't go in and mock them, right? This is why I do think Elijah, after his showdown with the prophets of Baal at the top of the mountain, when he had this showdown with them, he was mocking their mighty one at one point in their encounter, and he was like, "Oh, maybe he's gone out to pee and piss himself. That's why he's sitting here and not responding to you guys. Maybe you should cut yourselves more and do all these other things. Maybe he can't hear you, right?" He mocked the mighty one behind those prophets. That's why I think literally he ran for his life and was filled with fear from Jezebel and all the rest of it. He got completely filled with fear after that and ran from Jezebel and went into the wilderness until Yahweh spoke to him in the cave. Understand, he reviled a mighty one. It's not for us to do that. It's not our place to do that. It's outside of the ROE. But Michael, the chief messenger, the chief immortal, in contending with the devil, this is literally the dragon, and Michael are having a showdown. When he disputed about the body of Moshe, presumed not to bring against him a blasphemous accusation, but said, Yahweh rebuke you. Okay? But these blaspheme. So Michael understood the chain of command. He understood the chief shepherd's ruling and Yahweh's ruling on how to contend with these people. Now, question, why is the dragon? Why did the devil want the body of Moshe? Right? This is one of those strange things that you got to consider for a second here. What would the devil want with the body, the physical body of Moshe? What would he want to do with that? Understand, taking a picture and remember all of these things that they're doing with the genetic alteration of people. And understand, Moshe himself had his very nature transformed because he spoke with Elohim face to face. His nature was transformed. He literally was glowing like with the fire of Yahweh was upon him. He was altered. He was not just like another man. He had an actual essence of Yahweh upon him, and the people hearkened to his voice. So if he could take the body of Moshe and put into it the spirit of the beast or the spirit of these other beings, right? He has a good opportunity to be able to weaponize that against people for great lying signs and wonders. But we see literally the divine intervention. Yahweh, this is all outside of this is never really talked about in the scriptures. It doesn't tell us anywhere about this story, and not in our canonical version of the books that we got today. But this is one of those stories. This was a big deal. Okay. Yahweh literally had to send his chief immortal down to guard the body of Moshe from the dragon so that he didn't have access to it, so that he could use it and manipulate it and weaponize it against the people of Yah. This is a pretty critical verse. That's why I love the book of Jude, because it's got just these tiny little synopsis, and you're like, dang, there's some serious heavy stuff going on behind the scenes that we barely know anything about. But Michael literally came in as reinforcements to protect the people from that great deception. Praise be to Yah. Now, but the wicked, right? But these blaspheme that which they do not know, and that which they know naturally, like unreasoning beasts. In these they corrupt themselves. Woe to them, because they've gone in the way of Cain, and gave themselves to the delusion of Balaam for a reward, and perished in the rebellion of Korah. These are rocky reefs in your love feasts, feasting with you, feeding themselves without fear. waterless clouds borne about by the winds, late autumn trees without fruit, twice dead pulled up by the roots, wild waves of the sea foaming up their own shame, straying stars for whom the blackness of darkness is kept forever. And Enoch, the seventh from Adam, also prophesied of these, saying, See, Yahweh comes with his myriads of set apart ones to execute judgment on all, to punish all who are wicked among them concerning all their wicked works, which they committed in a wicked way, and concerning all the harsh words with which wicked sinners have spoken against him. These are grumblers, complainers, who walk according to their own lusts, and their mouth speaks proudly, admiring faces of others for the sake of gain. But you, beloved ones, remember the words spoken by the emissaries of our Master Yeshua Messiah, because they told you that there would be mockers in the last time who would walk according to their own wicked lusts. These are the ones who cause divisions, not having the Spirit. But you, beloved ones, building yourselves up on your most set apart belief, praying in the set apart Spirit, keep yourselves in the love of Elohim, looking for the compassion of our Master Yeshua Messiah unto everlasting life. Show compassion towards some who are doubting, but others save with fear, snatching them out of the flames, hating even the garments defiled by the flesh. And to him who is able to keep you from stumbling and to present you blameless before the presence of his esteem with exceeding joy, to the only wise Elohim, our Savior, be esteem and greatness and might and authority both now and forever. Amen. When we keep ourselves rooted in the power of his word, in the authority of his kingdom, and we have to engage the enemy in those territories, we have to live in those areas, we have to go work in those areas, we have to go seek to save the lost that are in those areas. We must invest in our word, we must invest in his word like never before, because that's literally what sustains us when we go into those zones. This is the literal source of life for us. This is why we can walk into those territories and be able to be shielded, guarded, protected, provided for. But understand also, this is not for everybody to go in and do. It's not for everyone to go and engage in the enemy's face, because some of you guys have so many doors still open to the enemy that it leaves the enemy opportunities to steal, kill, and destroy, to ruin, cause ruin in your life. I've seen a lot of people who start to get into spiritual warfare and they start mocking these principalities, praying them down and trying to tear them down and call angels down, trying to literally be the shot callers on the earth, calling angels in to do these different things. Like, understand, I've seen those people's lives get destroyed because they got into it without a deeper understanding of the rules of engagement, or they had major areas of problems in their lives already set up. I totally fell into this, you guys. Back in 2015, 2016, I started prayer walking around in Boulder, Colorado, and I started trying to call down principalities and stuff that I was identifying that were in there. It My life blew up like crazy, super fast, because I still had a lot of worldly strongholds that I was struggling with at the time, but I was really zealous. I had a lot of passion and desire to try to see people set free. You know what I'm saying? And now where I had better fruit, better fruit was in one-on-one interactions with people, talking to them about what's going on in their lives, praying with them. That was where there was great kingdom work that was being able to flourish. But just going in and trying to call out big bosses when you're still early on in your training is not something to just jump into so quickly, if that makes sense. Just trying to give you a cautionary warning about it, because it can eat you alive in a serious way. But this world that we're living in, you guys, is saturated with these wars that are going on behind the scenes, where the enemy is seeking territory. He's seeking to establish himself and encroach upon the places where the righteous remnant have been holding out, where the places where the morality of this nation, the morality of the world, the morality of the kingdom of Yah is still there. He's trying to go and take those take those territories back and make them his own. And so you must understand, that's truly at the heart of this great civil war that we're really in. The war against tyrants must, please don't ever lose sight of understanding who are the real tyrants behind those tyrants that we see, and understand we have an opportunity to engage that every day when we grow and cultivate the fruits of the disciplines of his kingdom. We are able to fight back in a much more strategic and profound way. When my wife and I decided to go out and leave that family of mine behind, to leave that kingdom behind, the promises of what I had been given there, to leave the security behind, the stability in a sense behind. And we sold our house. We had to take all of these preps. We had totes and totes and totes of preps because we weren't just prepping for ourselves. We were trying to prepare for like a small army. We were trying to prepare for an army that we could arm and equip. I'm not just talking about with like firearms, talking about with clothing, medical supplies, all kinds of food. And like we always have it in our hearts to try to clothe and feed and provide care for people. That's like just hardwired into my wife and I. And like we were trying to literally prepare for that. And instead we had to take all of those supplies and we literally were like, we need to redistribute these out to the people that have need. And so we gave those things away. We gave it all away because we realized at the end of the day, we can't take this with us. We are moving our life. My entire family was going to move into an RV. We had to get rid of everything. And you know what? That was something that we needed because it made us take very careful consideration of what was most precious to us, what was most valuable to us, and what were we going to invest our life into. Because you know what? We couldn't store up, like, I'm a minister. I can't store up a retirement and inheritance for my children on this earth. The place that we store it up, you're okay. The place where we're storing it up is in the kingdom to come. Like that's the place that I can store up treasures for myself and for my family. Like the inheritance of my choosing is the one that my Father in heaven will choose for me. That's it. That's the one I can choose because I still lack the ability to foresee the future or prepare my family for a long-term perspective. My wife and I are looking at each other this morning. Abraham is like crawling around like crazy, right? I have a son, like an actual son, something that was just so inconceivable to me. You know, I've had lots of daughters, but to have a son now, it's different. And he's starting to really develop like a personality and he's funny. He's funny, you know, like he loves me. He loves me. He loves being around me. He loves crawling over to me and being around me. Like, and it's really cool. It's really exciting. It's still super difficult with twins. It's crazy. It's people are like, I don't even want to go there because it's just going to make me want to throw my head through a building. Anyways, it's still pretty relentlessly difficult. Whatever. That's what it's like. 2 babies all the time. It's still like that. Poop everywhere all the time. Changes. Sorry, my head's just going there. I can feel it. Anyways, it's like a wall. There's that tide of the enemy coming in. It's exhausting. He's preparing us for stuff, I'm sure. But there's these moments where I'm playing with him and like throwing him into the air and he's laughing and he's giggling and he's laughing so loud. And I'm just like, wow, I'm getting to play with my son. Like I'm getting to play with my child. What a gift.
There's my 4th born. Look it. Is it not right? But even the little dogs eat scraps that fall from the master's table. Abram, this sweet little guy. We've never had a son, and he just likes to wander around and eat scraps that fall from the table. Mr. Broccoli Boy. Broccoli Man.
And leaves a little trail behind him wherever he goes.
Hi, handsome. Hi. You big guy. Yeah.
You know? Like what a reward. What a treasure. That I, as a 15-year-old or 13-year-old, I couldn't imagine. I could never have imagined something so sweet. You know? It's just I couldn't have imagined it and how good that would feel. Because he's not just this little baby anymore. You know, babies are really tough for me. Incredibly brutal. But to see my children alive still, you know, when we made that choice and we left all of that years ago, we didn't know what it would be like. I didn't know if we would live a year. I didn't know if we would live 5 years. You know, it was very hard for us to imagine that. It still is. I still can't imagine what my life will be like 5 years from now. I couldn't have pictured it then, you know. But this is why the Father says he stores up for us things better than we can hope or imagine, you know. Because I have these girls here. Hi.
We're gonna do our cold immersion tonight.
Yeah, we'll do a cold immersion tonight. That'll be great.
And I told Mama she's cold. Yes, bet you. Cold.
It's not even that cold. It's cold enough. 50 degrees is cold enough.
No, it is.
You have to just give me a few minutes. I'll wrap this up. Okay, love? Thanks.
See you, Mom.
They want to do our cold immersion tonight. We did one last night and they loved it. How could I imagine that? You know, that would be like the highlight of my children's night, that they'd come asking for that. I couldn't have imagined any of this stuff, you guys. It's been a long journey, but I'm thankful for the way that he stores up rewards for us, that he could give us the gift of life, that he could give us life, So I don't know exactly what tomorrow will bring, I don't know what the next year will bring for me and my family, where we'll be, what we'll be doing. I don't know what 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Chelsea and I literally were sitting there like, I can't imagine. I don't know if will we really see our children grow up? We have these conversations all the time because we understand the days that we're living in are like a whisper. They're a vapor. They're a shadow that comes and goes. And you know what? We rejoice in that because she's like, I'm so tired. I'm like, I'm so tired too. We would welcome our relief of our end. We are those who long to be with the master. She is very tired too. And we long for that day of rest. I think a lot of parents long for that day of rest. They're sitting here. They're like, I pray for it all the time. I pray for it all the time. Just let me rest. But until that day, may we labor diligently. May we labor hard for the kingdom, because this is what we are born for. We are born to labor for his kingdom and to fight with our every dying breath for those that are lost, for those that are weary, for those that are oppressed, because this is the kingdom that we are supposed to fight for. And you know what? His reward is with him, and he is coming speedily. So we must fight consistently, day and night. I love you all. Thanks for coming on a journey with me today. As remember, don't ever forget this war of the ages that we're all in. So fight ferociously, live courageously every single day of your life, because the days may be evil, but you, O mighty man of valor, woman of valor, were born for such a time as this. I love you guys. I'll talk to you soon.